Have you ever stared at your ceiling at 3 in the morning, sinking into your expensive memory foam mattress, and wondered how our ancestors actually survived the night? Think about it. Buying a mattress today feels less like shopping and more like applying for a mortgage on a rectangle. We obsess over memory foam, cooling gel layers, ergonomic orthopedic zones, 100-night risk-free trials, and somehow, we end up buying a pillow that costs more than a goat. But for nearly all of human history, absolutely none of this existed. There were no bed showrooms, no box springs, no fitted sheets, and definitely no tiny tags threatening legal consequences if you remove them. So, how did ancient humans sleep without waking up as a frozen, insect-covered appetizer for a saber-toothed tiger? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the fascinating, dangerous, and incredibly surprising history of human sleep. If you love your bed, or if you've ever struggled with insomnia, hit that subscribe button, because by the end of this video, you will never look at your bedroom the same way again. The obvious answer to how our ancestors slept is that they just slept on the ground. But saying they just slept on the ground is a little like saying humans crossed the oceans on pieces of wood. It is technically true, but impressively unhelpful. Our ancestors did not simply collapse wherever gravity placed them when the sun went down. They deliberately chose locations, built complex sleeping surfaces, learned to control fire, utilized the chemical properties of plants, shared the burden of protection, and slowly turned one of the most terrifyingly dangerous moments in daily life into something almost comfortable. But before humans could invent the concept of a bed, they first had to solve a much older, much more urgent problem. How do you sleep deeply without being eaten alive? Before beds could exist, our ancestors had to solve a multi-million-year-old sleeping problem. Where exactly do you put an unconscious primate? For millions of years, the safest and only logical answer was up. Many living apes today still build sleeping platforms in trees. Chimpanzees, for example, often carefully select specific flexible branches, arrange them into a curved bowl shape, and add soft leafy material on top as a makeshift cushion. It is basically custom-built furniture, except the delivery crew is also the customer, and they occasionally throw fruit at strangers. Tree sleeping made perfect evolutionary sense for smaller primates. Elevation dramatically reduced contact with ground-dwelling predators, biting insects, and damp soil. But as our direct evolutionary lineage became larger, more terrestrial, and perfectly adapted for walking upright on two legs, sleeping high up in the branches became significantly less convenient. A heavy-bodied hominin trying to balance on a branch while fast asleep is not majestic. It is a fatal accident waiting to happen. Transitioning to ground sleeping, however, created a brutal and unforgiving trade-off. The ground was much easier to reach and infinitely better for building large social groups. But it was also where the lions lived. To make terrestrial sleep possible, early humans needed much more than just raw courage. They needed technology, they needed unprecedented cooperation, and they needed a specific talent that modern people still use every single night. The ability to turn a vast, dangerous environment into a controlled, safe little bubble. The turning point was probably fire. Fire was one of the biggest game changers in the history of our species. A carefully maintained fire offered radiant warmth against the freezing night air, light in total darkness, and smoke to choke out swarms of mosquitoes. It also offered perimeter protection from nocturnal predators that preferred their meals to be less illuminated. But fire did something else revolutionary. It extended social time after the sun went down. Around a crackling fire, a group could stay up, eat together, repair their stone tools, care for their children, and collectively decide who was going to check on that highly suspicious rustling noise in the bushes. Shelter choice mattered immensely, too. A deep rock overhang could block biting winds, while an elevated patch of dry ground prevented a sleeping family from becoming part of the local drainage system during a storm. Even without walls, location was architecture. Then there was the mathematical advantage of group size. Sleeping near dozens of other people meant more ears listening, and exponentially more chances that somebody would wake up before a leopard attacked. Human groups also naturally contain different sleep patterns. Some people naturally stay awake later, while others rise earlier. In a small prehistoric camp, that natural biological variation may have created overlapping periods of vigilance, leaving very few moments in the night when absolutely everyone was completely asleep. This doesn't mean prehistoric camps had an official night shift manager with a clipboard. It just means ordinary biological differences became a massive survival advantage. Once fire, cooperation, and carefully chosen campsites made ground sleeping fundamentally safer, our ancestors could finally focus on a new luxury: comfort. They started actively selecting dry locations, avoiding exposed wind, and gathering soft, specific plants. They likely used animal hides and built repeated, dedicated sleeping areas. The first bed was not a piece of furniture, it was a strategy. The earliest beds were probably discovered the exact same way humans discovered most useful things in our history. Somebody got tired of being uncomfortable and started moving things around. The ground is a thief. It steals your body heat, collects moisture, attracts insects, and contains rocks placed with pinpoint accuracy right beneath the human spine. Even without knowing a single mathematical formula about thermodynamics, early humans quickly noticed that a thick layer of dry grass felt substantially warmer than laying on bare soil. Broad leaves added softness. Bundled reeds created airflow. Thick animal hides could block the wind. Nobody needed to magically invent comfort. They only had to observe it in nature. The tree nest essentially became a floor nest. But ground bedding had one major, unavoidable flaw. It became absolutely disgusting. A pile of grass used night after night would collect sweat, food fragments, shed skin cells, and whatever the toddler of the tribe had been holding 5 minutes earlier. Fleas and other pests would view this not as a hygiene problem, but as rapid urban development. That explains why early sleeping surfaces were almost certainly temporary, regularly replaced, or intentionally burned. Burning the old beds was a stroke of genius. It would remove accumulated waste, destroy generations of parasites, and leave behind a thick layer of fine ash. Ash is incredibly important because it is much less welcoming to crawling insects than damp organic material. Smoke, as a byproduct, may have helped immensely too. A smoky shelter is unpleasant when you are trying to breathe, but it is deeply lethal when you are a mosquito. Early humans did not need a degree in insect chemistry. They only needed to notice that certain plants smelled strong when crushed or burned, and that sleeping near those plants resulted in slightly less midnight scratching. This is where bedding begins to look less like a lucky accident and more like accumulated knowledge. One person notices that dry sedge grass is softer. Another learns that green branches smoke too much. Someone else discovers that a particular aromatic leaf discourages insects. These small observations were remembered, copied, and taught. How do we actually know this? Grass does not usually survive for 200,000 years. It decomposes, burns, or gets trampled into dust. That is what makes Border Cave in South Africa so remarkably important. The cave preserves microscopic traces of grass bedding dating back at least 200,000 years. Researchers found plant remains concentrated toward the rear of the shelter, exactly where people appear to have created comfortable surfaces for sleeping. And this was not just random grass tossed onto dirt. Much of it rested directly on intentional layers of ash. Fine ash can physically obstruct the breathing systems of ticks and other crawling arthropods. In other words, the oldest known mattress in human history essentially came with built-in bug control. Researchers also found tiny fragments of camphor bushwood among the bedding remains. Plants in this group produce aromatic compounds that repel insects. Later evidence from Sibudu, another South African rock shelter, makes this pattern even clearer. Around 77,000 years ago, people there meticulously constructed bedding from broad-leaved grasses, topped with leaves from a local tree known for its insect-killing properties. By roughly 58,000 years ago, bedding at Sibudu was being burned regularly as part of routine camp maintenance. 200,000 years ago, people were already choosing sleeping zones, laying down vegetation, using ash, managing insects, and cleaning old surfaces with fire. They didn't sleep without beds, they just slept without furniture stores. Archaeology is excellent at telling us that ancient people placed grass on cave floors. It is much less capable of telling us whether someone woke up at 2 a.m, stared into the fire, and regretted something embarrassing they said during a mammoth hunt. That is where evidence ends and hypotheses begin. One popular idea is that ancient humans actually slept in 2 entirely separate phases, waking for a quiet interval in the middle of the night. Historical records from much later societies describe a first sleep and a second sleep, with people using the dark gap to pray, talk, work, or visit neighbors. But those records do not prove all prehistoric humans slept that way. Sleep patterns are shaped by latitude, season, temperature, artificial light, and danger. A winter camp in Ice Age Europe may have followed a drastically different rhythm compared to a tropical foraging group. Modern studies of non-industrial communities show that people living without electric lighting don't necessarily fall asleep the moment the sun disappears. They remain awake around fires, socialize, and their sleep is flexible rather than divided neatly into one supposedly natural pattern. We also cannot confidently reconstruct prehistoric sleeping positions. Even Neanderthal bedrooms should be treated cautiously. Yes, caves contain hearths, tools, and activity zones, but assigning modern room labels makes ancient spaces seem tidier than they were. A sleeping area might become a butchering area the next day. Prehistoric life did not come with floor plans. Once humans made sleeping on the ground safer, sleep stopped being merely a biological shutdown and became a complex social event. A camp at night was an organized system of warmth, protection, caregiving, and information. People gathered near the fire because it was useful, but also because everyone else they trusted was there. Sleeping physically close together reduced heat loss and made it infinitely easier to protect vulnerable infants. A child waking in the dark didn't have to search for help. Help was breathing 2 feet away, probably using someone else's arm as a pillow. This closeness created new responsibilities and strengthened human cooperation more than any other time of day. After dark, movement became dangerous, forcing the group to concentrate in one illuminated spot. That created dedicated time for conversation, instruction, and storytelling. Stories around the fire were not simply entertainment. They were vital survival data. A memorable story about someone ignoring tracks near a river is much easier to retain than a formal safety manual titled "Reasons Not to Approach the Crocodile." As human settlements eventually became more permanent, sleeping areas became increasingly structured. Floors were cleaned, hearths placed carefully, and raised platforms separated bodies from damp ground. Bedding became woven, stuffed, inherited, and eventually decorated far beyond anything required by the human spine. But the most important invention in the history of sleep was not the mattress, it was trust. To sleep beside other people is to surrender your situational awareness, while assuming they will not harm you, abandon you, or allow something hungry to walk into camp. Every shared sleeping place was a small social contract renewed each night. Long before humans built cities, they practiced civilization in the dark. They kept the fire alive, and they kept each other alive. Today, most of us sleep isolated inside climate-controlled boxes on engineered foam, under weighted blankets, beside charging smartphones. And yet the ancient logic is still there. We still build nests. We meticulously arrange pillows, choose sides, adjust temperatures, block light, check locks, and place familiar objects within reach. Some people need silence. Others need a fan or the digital sound of rain. These habits look modern, but they follow an old pattern. Control the environment completely before surrendering control of your body. That is what a bed really is. It is not just furniture, but a psychological permission slip to become vulnerable. Our ancestors created that permission with grass, ash, fire, and other people. We create it with door locks, smart thermostats, and an unreasonable number of pillows. The materials changed, the problem did not. Even insomnia carries an echo of that past. The human brain was not designed to switch off like a laptop. It monitors temperature, noise, social tension, and danger. Sometimes that vigilance is useful. Sometimes it just keeps you awake at 3:17 a.m. Replaying an awkward conversation from 8 years ago. Evolution is not always helpful with your schedule. The story of ancient sleep reminds us that comfort did not appear suddenly. It was built gradually through observation and shared knowledge. A softer plant, a drier corner, a useful leaf. Small discoveries accumulated until the ground itself became a human invention. So ancient humans did not sleep without beds in the way we imagine. They slept without bed frames and mattress brands. They still prepared sleeping places, maintained them, and protected one another around them. Every night you close your eyes and trust the world not to kill you for several hours. That is an astonishing act. And when you sink into your memory foam, adjust your cooling gel pillow, and complain that the mattress feels slightly too firm, remember where it started. A pile of grass, a glowing fire, and someone staying awake to watch over you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me your weirdest sleep habit. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, sleep well.